Hello, I'm Carly Krakow, and I'm so glad to be here today with Dr. Mona Harb joining me from Beirut. She is a professor at AUB and co-editor of Jadaliyya. Thank you for being here today, Dr. Harb.
My pleasure, Carly.
Thank you. So we just passed a month since the Beirut explosion, and in your wonderful Quick Thoughts piece in conversation with Muin Rabbani for Jadaliyya, you discussed what still needed to be investigated about the cause of the explosion and the source of the ammonium nitrate. Could you tell us what have we learned in the past month and what information is being withheld or still needs to be found out?
Yes, sure. Well, unfortunately, we still do not know much. We don't know what caused the explosion, nor do we know what is the source of that ammonium nitrate, how it landed in that port. We've heard stories about a welding operation that took place on the afternoon of August 4, the day of the blast, apparently to close some large hole in the hangar where the ammonium nitrate was stored. This might have ignited the explosion, but there are no details about this. People don't really believe it. There are sort of leaks in the newspapers about this. Apparently, the workers who did that welding were arrested, but again, it's all hush-hush. So we are still with a big question mark around these two essential questions. We know also that multiple public officials knew about the ammonium nitrate, and there were several reports about the danger and that it needed to be acted upon, but it seems that they were throwing the hot potato from one to another and nothing happened. Now, what happened practically is that we have now a court that has been tasked with the responsibility of the investigation. This was done just before the government of Hassan Diab resigned, and there has been an appointment of a judge, Fadi Sawan, to lead that investigation. The judicial court is the highest court in the country that is responsible for such investigation, and this might send a message that this will be an independent and reliable investigation. However, there are at least three elements that indicate the contrary. The first is the fact that Judge Fadi Sawan is not completely independent. He has taken legal decisions before to please security officials. That was investigated by Taimur Azhari in Al Jazeera, actually. The second element is that the Judge Awaidat, who oversees, he's the Attorney General who oversees these investigations, seems to be pretty much implicated in the explosion itself. He seemed to have ordered that welding to take place. He's also a parent of the former Minister of Public Works, under which the port belongs, and there seems to be some conflict of interest involved here. And the third element is the fact that there has been arrest. 25 people are arrested, but most of them are low-profile employees of that port, and none of the high-ranked officials who are responsible were touched. So this also indicates a very possible attempt at shifting the blame away, like typically happens in such situations. So in sum, there's no one who has been held accountable, no one resigned, and no public official has made any formal statement about what happened and why it happened.
Thank you for that extremely informative update. So just now, and in your writing, you've addressed key issues of negligence and corruption of the country's ruling elite and the new wave of protests that have emerged. There has also been an international response, including from France, and you referred to all this as positioning on the Lebanese chessboard. Following the already existing financial crisis and obviously so much more, what can we expect next, and how, to use your words, can a people-centered recovery process be ensured at this point?
Yes, that's a great question, actually. Things are moving very rapidly on that front. The French president has already visited Lebanon a second time. He arrived to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the creation of Greater Lebanon, and he arrived with the condition that a new prime minister should have been selected after the resignation of the former government, and this was done. This was in a record time. So we really see that there are things being played in the background, in the corridors of decision-making of these geopolitics. The French president seems fully committed to continue his agenda and to implement what he's calling reforms. So he has teams of people who are requesting our Lebanese political rulers to do reforms at the level of finance, economy, and banking. happening to ensure that we're actually able to benefit from an IMF bailout and to benefit also from the said pledges that France had made to Lebanon, I think a year or more ago, and to reform the power sector, the energy sector. And we're going to see many of his envoys in the weeks and months to come. He's promised that he's coming back in December. So it very much feels like we're entering what I would call now a neo-mandate era. There's something very new on the geopolitical scene happening vis-a-vis Lebanon. So amidst this, the people-centered recovery that should be really the big title of the response to this horrible explosion is a huge challenge. We have dysfunctional state institutions, there's an overwhelming mistrust in these public institutions. Relief and aid are happening in a very messy, ad hoc and uncoordinated ways. Many actors are mobilized at various scales, on the ground and virtually. There are international organizations mobilizing all their resources, NGOs, INGOs everywhere. It's a very complex scene. And the way to coordinate a response that puts people's livelihood as the main objective is very challenging. So many people are trying to do that. I'll speak from my position. I work with the Beirut Urban Lab at the AUB, where we're trying to support a national committee that was formed by professional syndicates of engineers, architects, lawyers, accountants, and contractors. So we're trying to inform the response and make it as much as possible focused on people's needs, especially the most vulnerable people. So we're trying to highlight the needs of women, children, elderly, migrants, refugees, LGBTQ individuals. It's very complex, but we need to shift the debate and make sure that these people are being urgently addressed in the response. So it's happening, but it's quite uncoordinated and messy, and it's not clear to what extent it's going to materialize.
Thank you. And there's so much more to cover here, of course, but just quickly before we go, I think you've touched on something I wanted to ask, which was in your piece. You wrote about neighborhoods like Karantina, many others devastated by the explosion, but that are already facing longstanding deep challenges, informal housing and employment, environmental issues, and more. So I guess what's the main thing that people who are not there, who cannot see for themselves right now, really need to understand about the impact on these areas?
Yes, that's also a very important question. Thank you. So here, the main message I want to convey is that the impact of the blast vary a lot geographically, because the neighborhoods are not, one neighborhood that resemble each other. We have a lot of clusters and separate within the neighborhoods that differentiated. So we don't have the same socioeconomical and urban history in the neighborhoods, and they shape very different responses from people. So if we take Karantina, and parts of Mari Mikhail and Jaitewe, where we have a lot of precarious groups, including Syrian refugees, migrant workers, impoverished families, female-headed households, elderly couples and individuals, people who have been living in this neighborhood for decades, who have been for generations even. They don't have access to support from children or remittances or social protection or insurance. So these people had some meager savings in the bank that all evaporated with the central bank's Ponzi scheme. The Lebanese pound devaluation made their situation even worse. The pandemic has blocked possible sources of job opportunities for many of them who were working small jobs and the day jobs. So it's extremely difficult for these people now to take that burden of the blast on their own. They also are sometimes hosting family members or neighbors in their very small and crowded homes. Their children are suffering major trauma caused by the PTSD after the blast, and they don't have access to mental health or medical health even. And they are also under threat of being evicted, because most of them live in very precarious rental arrangements, sometimes without a contract, most of the time without a contract. And now landlords are seeing the explosion as an opportunity to increase their income or to improve their livelihoods and want to kick them out. And there is a real danger of displacement and eviction and falling in further precarity for these groups. So this is, I would say, the most urgent issue to highlight. The other issues that we need to also address are, of course, the fact that many other people lost their livelihoods and their homes. Those are people maybe with more means. They have access to better social networks, to fresh funds from banking accounts they have abroad, or children who can send them remittances. There's still a lot of pain associated with their plight, but they have the privilege of having some choices of navigating the current catastrophe. Still, these neighborhoods hold a creative class, a vibrant nightlife, a lot of small businesses that gave a very strong cachet to these areas, but also created opportunities for jobs. And people have lost now these job opportunities. A lot of businesses are threatened of being closed forever. And these neighborhoods that used to form an economic centrality that served not only the city of Beirut, but I would say the national economy of Lebanon, is now under serious threat of being discontinued. So how to manage all this precarity at multiple scales in multiple sectors is a huge question that needs to be addressed. It goes back to what I was talking about earlier about the need to manage and coordinate well the response to mitigate the threats on the most vulnerable groups and to help the small and medium businesses restart their livelihoods and provide opportunities for people to stay where they had their businesses and their homes. Despite the traumas, address the mental health trauma, address the traumas through the mental health interventions that are much needed as well. It's a very complex equation that needs a lot of coordination, which is currently missing.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Harb, for shedding some light on indeed a very complex and crucial situation for Beirut right now. For more on this very important topic, please read Mona Harb's Quick Thoughts piece on the aftermath of the Beirut explosion up on Jadaliyya now.
Thank you, Carly.